And this administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America.
In 1964, President Lyndon Baines Johnson declared a war on poverty. Through his myriad of social reform programs, the president left a lasting legacy on the nation's poor. The war on poverty was designed to reduce the immense poverty rate of 22% in 1964. In Johnson's attempt to do so, he aimed to establish a more available public education system, bestow hope among the young, and expand the social welfare program. Despite the strong criticism he received, President Johnson proposed many acts and programs to enhance the economic well-being of impoverished Americans.
President Johnson's leadership was evident when he convinced Congress to pass his social welfare programs. Johnson was known for his persuasive personality and his ability to compromise and get results.
If there ever was a president who could master the legislative branch, who could get things passed, it was Lyndon Johnson, because he had been doing it for such a long time.
Senator Barry Goldwater, his opponent in the 1964 election, was an avid opponent of the war on poverty. There were many critics who believed Johnson's push for the war on poverty was just an effort to win votes in the fall election of 1964. Southern Democrats were also major opponents, which was ironic since the South was the region with the greatest concentration of poverty. This demonstrated the link between opposition to civil rights and the war on poverty. Johnson's Texas roots helped him gain support from Southern congressmen. President Johnson proved his leadership skills by making deals with his political opponents.
I thought you told me 2 months ago that you were going to pass a bill for me. That's right. Well, what happened? All hell's broken loose. Now, you know I'm for you, and you know that I'm going to help you any way I can. I've got nothing to do with what you're doing in the House investigation, but you damn near defeated the best education bill I've got, and I hope you're going to be proud of it.
The war on poverty was the center of Johnson's presidency.
Often presidents have something that's close to their hearts that they want to define them and their legacy as a president. And for Johnson, the war on poverty was to be his legacy.
Johnson's upbringing in East Texas allowed him to experience poverty firsthand. The Great Depression and New Deal influenced his belief that the government should help bring poor citizens out of poverty. Johnson sought to enhance Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal legacy.
The Economic Opportunity Act of 1964 was proposed by Johnson to provide every citizen with the opportunity for education and training, the opportunity to work, and the opportunity to live in civility and dignity. The unfortunate circumstances that led to the need for an Economic Opportunity Act was that in 1964, more than 1/5 of the total U.S. population was living in poverty, earning less than $3,000 per year. In a period of unprecedented prosperity, approximately 1/2 of all non-whites were living in poverty. The philosophy behind the Economic Opportunity Act was that the government has an obligation to offer the American people a chance to earn and maintain a comfortable living for themselves and their families. With the adoption of the Economic Opportunity Act, 11 additional programs were established. Job Corps, Neighborhood Youth Corps, Work Study, Head Start, the Food Stamp System, Urban and Rural Community Action, Adult Basic Education, Voluntary Assistance for Needy Children, Loans to Rural Families, Assistance for Migrant Agricultural Employees, Employment and Investment Incentives, Work Experience, and Volunteers in Service to America. The main purpose of each of these programs was to provide the needy with the chance to better their lives. Despite the vast amount of opposition towards the Economic Opportunity Act, President Johnson's leadership persuaded Congress to pass the bill, and on August 20, 1964, it was passed and thus began construction of government-funded social welfare programs.
President Johnson followed in the footsteps of John F. Kennedy when he committed to ending hunger by signing the Food Stamp Act of 1964. A cornerstone of the war on poverty and of Johnson's legacies, food stamps have provided better nutrition for tens of millions of children living in poor households. Now called SNAP, the program has continued to expand over the years and currently assists 47 million Americans. However, there has been controversy over funding for food stamps, with billions having been cut from the program recently.
Head Start, another component of Johnson's legacy, was created to close the large educational gap between the poor and the wealthy. On average, poor children start kindergarten with a vocabulary a fraction of the size of their middle to upper class peers. This program receives bipartisan government support to provide health, social, educational, and mental health services to children in low-income families. This graph shows the increasing enrollment in Head Start each year since 1972. In 2012, there were approximately 1 million enrollments in the Head Start program. Since its inception, Head Start has enrolled over 21 million children. Most analysis claim there are short-term positive effects of the Head Start program, such as improved health, increased scores on academic exams, and higher self-esteem.
Johnson's legacy also includes the Job Corps, which is designed to give young Americans the opportunity to become skilled, responsible workers. Johnson wanted to make sure every American was able to receive a job to create a better life. Job Corps provides food, shelter, work clothes, healthcare, and job training to poverty-stricken young people from 16 to 21 years across the United States. This federal program has served more than 1.9 million young men and women at the end of the 20th century.
President Johnson signed the Medicare bill on July 30, 1965, to provide health insurance for elderly citizens. Medicare requires employees to contribute a small portion of their salaries towards a health insurance fund. These payroll deductions enabled participants 65 years or older to be provided with hospital care, diagnostic care, and post-hospital home visits. President Lyndon B. Johnson stated during the signing of the Medicare bill, "There are more than 18 million Americans over the age of 65. Most of them have low incomes. Most of them are threatened by illness and medical expenses that they cannot afford." Although the Medicare bill has undergone modifications since its passage, the basic structure has remained as an enduring legacy to LBJ.
President Lyndon Baines Johnson introduced his War on Poverty to increase the health, skills, jobs, and access to economic resources to those who constantly struggle.
So we walk to open the gates to opportunity. We're also going to give all our people, black and white, the help that they need to walk through those gates.
Throughout his War on Poverty, Johnson left a lasting legacy which ultimately reduced poverty by more than 1/3 since 1967. This graph shows the predicted poverty rates without Johnson's social welfare programs. It is evident that the poverty rates in America were reduced after Johnson's wage of the War on Poverty in 1964. In total, Johnson's legacy has helped 1.2 billion people out of poverty between 1968 and 2012.
This graph shows the hypothetical decrease of poverty rates during the 20th century. In 1981, when Reagan assumed presidency, he cut back on the War on Poverty. This graph shows the predicted elimination by 1978 if Johnson's actions were upheld.
Johnson's War on Poverty has a legacy that's still with us today. Some of the programs that were created, like Head Start, like the Job Corps, are still with us today. The increases in Medicare and Medicaid, the increases in social services are still with us today.
Opponents of LBJ's War on Poverty believe that his social welfare programs create a culture of dependence. However, many people attest to the importance of the War on Poverty and believe that the revolution should be renewed to care for the people who are the most in need. This graph shows the number of millions of Americans who were kept from poverty each year from 2008 to 2012. Johnson's social welfare programs have prevented millions of American families from falling below the poverty line. Despite real growth in the War on Poverty, there is still more work to be done. Although America is seen as a land of economic opportunity, there were still 49.7 million Americans living below the poverty line in 2012. The War on Poverty legacy was a legacy of success because Johnson was able to lift millions of Americans out of poverty.
Absolutely, the War on Poverty was a success in many ways. Not as successful as Johnson would like, in part because the Johnson presidency was troubled because of the conflicts in the 1960s, especially around the Vietnam War.
Any other president in the 1960s would have a difficult time getting legislation passed without the support of Southern Democrats. But with Johnson's leadership skills, he was able to do just that. Lyndon Baines Johnson was able to leave a lasting legacy and provide America's poor with hope for the future through his extensive social welfare programs.